What's up, Epic 7? Well, here it is. You asked for it, so here is my RGB tier list for 2024. Before we jump into this, I want to cover a couple of things. First of all, this is your game. You don't listen to anybody telling you not to pick the unit you want to pick. You follow your heart, you pick the unit that makes the game fun for you, because if the game isn't fun, what are you even doing here? The reason we're doing this is because the anniversary event is rolling out, and there's a lot of Selector tickets and 5-star pulls heading our way. So much so, a lot of newer players are re-rolling, a lot of people are coming back to the game, and they're adding a lot of 5-star pullable units into the free pool of Adventurous Path of Connections, and it really mixes things up. Old tier lists are no longer valid. I can't emphasize this enough. If a tier list is more than a few months old, don't trust it. If it's more than 6 months old, ignore it, because this game changes often, dynamically, drastically at times. You wanna really have a really bad start, use a tier list from 2020 to tell you which units to start off with. Let me know how that works out for you. So, before we get into this, there's a couple things to know. These Selector tickets, we are assuming they work exactly like the Selector tickets worked from the anniversary in 2023, which was they work on any unit that has already had its banner completed at the times the tickets are released. So you can't sandbag them and save them for new units that'll be released down the road. You won't be able to use them on Frida, for example, because her banner will be live still when the tickets are released. I hope that makes sense to everybody. Also, none of these Selector tickets will work on Collaboration Heroes. Collaboration Heroes are the true limiteds of Epic 7. You have no way to access them other than Epic 7 reforging a new collaboration with that IP, which seems less and less likely. Also, the RGB selectors we get from the anniversary can't be used on limited units, although I have seen some packs, and who knows what else they may add. If it is a limited selector ticket, then you can access the limited units. Those oftentimes have their own limitations on how far back you can go. So I'll go ahead and discuss the limited units in a separate column. So this is how we're going to break down this tier list. First is going to be free units. And by free units, I mean you can acquire them in-game one way or another, through connections, through hunt challenges, through Adventurous Path, but with a little bit of elbow grease, these units can be yours just by farming them out in the game. So even though some of these units will have banners, you most certainly don't want to use your Selector tickets on these units, because you will get them for free with just a little bit of effort. Then we'll talk about Collaboration Heroes that you cannot pull. Before we even start, I'm just going to stick Frida down here, right? I know she's not a Collaboration Hero, but you cannot pull her from these Selector tickets because her banner will be live across the anniversary. So just getting that one out of the way. Right now, her and anything in the future, you will not be able to use these Selector tickets on. Then we'll talk about limited heroes in their own right, because really this is focusing on the RGB selectors, so it'll only units in these first 4 columns will be selectable. But if you do get your hands on a limited Selector ticket because you bought a really nice pack, I will discuss the limited heroes and, which ones I think are worth pulling and which ones are kind of worth passing. The need buffed column, this is where if you get a unit that's in this column, don't be too upset. Stick it in your storage, gear it to have fun with it. No unit in this game stays unusable forever, right? Look at Death Dealer Ray. Look at Blood Moon Haste. Look at Apocalypse Ravi. Look at Arbiter Heckin' Vildred, who has had a meteoric rise with a horrible fall and now a meteoric rise again. If a unit is not usable in this game, just wait. They'll come around. Then I'll discuss PvP units, and the reason I'm putting them in their own column is people who are ready to jump into PvP might want to kind of know what are some of the good PvP units to get, but principally this list is going to be targeting new players. People who are either just starting up to about maybe 6 to 9 months in the game. People beyond that typically don't need tier lists. So the people that are going to be looking at this list, the people who will benefit the most, are the newer players. So if you see me take, you know, a really, really good hero and put it in a, you know, PvP list, or don't pull this list, or not in a Pillar of Epic 7 list, understand it's because newer players either can't build that unit or aren't engaging with that aspect of the game yet, right? Some use in game means these units are solid. These are units that you want. You want to have them in your toolbox. They're usable in hunts and expeditions. They're usable somewhere, so they're good units to have. But they're not Renaissance units. Those are the Pillars of Epic 7. These are the closest thing to must-have units that you will find in the game. They're who, if you do not have these units, one of your selector goes into getting these units. So let's jump right in. First, we're going to discuss these free units, right? So, all you need to do to get Zeno is do some Hall of Trials, and I'll tell you what, Zeno is just about the worst, most dog water unit in the game. If you pick him up, it's almost as a collector's item. He has got minimal use. He doesn't do much damage. He does a lot of debuffs. Doesn't have any value in PvE other than being decent morale in the Labyrinth. Not really worth the pickup unless you're a collector, but you can get him by using currency in Hall of Trials to purchase him. There are better things to use that currency on early on, trust. Yuna. Yuna is actually a really, really good unit for new players. Constant AoE spamming, attack buffing. She's being added to the Covenant summons as well. So not only can you get her for free, but you can get her from your random summons as well now. Used to be she only came from doing her story, but now she is actually a pullable unit, which makes me wonder if we're going to see RG, you know, green or fire Yuna, or maybe an ML Yuna sometime down the road. Cermia, Vivian, and Sigret. All three of these you can get from doing the hunt challenges, because Sigret is one of the easiest, most accessible ways to get into Wyvern. Cermia is really, really good for Golem, and Vivian is really, really good for Banshee, as well as some other hunts. So these are all units that you should get, but you pick them up from doing your in-game hunt challenges, which take a little bit of time, but you bang them out. Bomb model Kanna, you will get for free from the connections. You can also summon her on banners and randomly, but you can pick her up by doing her connection mission by clicking the connection table in your lobby. She is a fantastic unit, especially if you get her on Bloodstone, which is a hard to get artifact, but once you get it, she can practically become a damage dealing healer for your team and make a lot of things easier. Tamarinne is the newest addition to the connections. You used to only be able to get her from her banner, and now she is in the connections. The most important PvE Soul Weaver in the game for free. And Breig is being added to the Adventurous Path. Now, I've had people say, hey, I've almost completed, or I've already completed the Adventurous Path. Can I still get Breig? Yes, of course you can. Even if you complete it, when they release Breig, the Adventurous Path icon is going to reappear. He will probably be at the very end. He'll probably be one of the last missions on the Adventurous Path. And maybe if you already did the stuff to get him, you're grandfathered in, or maybe you'll have to redo some of the stuff to get him to qualify to get your Breig. But do not worry. There's nothing you can do in this game that will stop you from collecting Breig from Adventurous Path at any point in the game. Those are your free units, everybody. And what a powerhouse of free units, right? Two of the strongest PvE heroes in the game, and three of the strongest hunt heroes in the game. Really incredible support hero, and, you know, Yuna and Zeno, which are Yuna and Zeno. Now, collaboration heroes. There is nothing you can do to get these heroes. I'm sorry. Collaborations are the true limited of the game, and unless those IPs want to collab with us again and we're able to get a new contract going, you'll never see these heroes again. It's just the way of it, and I'm sorry for those of you who missed out. I did an entire video on why we're not getting collaboration reruns and what to expect from that. It'll be linked in the description of the video if you want to learn more about collaborations, but Winter, Ning Ning, Karena, and Giselle from the Espa collaboration are not accessible in any way, shape, or form from this event. Biken, Dizzy, Elfelt, Jacko, and Soul Bad Guy from the Guilty Gears collaboration. Malim, Rimuru, Shuna and Benimaru from that time I got reincarnated as a slime, Roy Mustang, Edward Elric, Riza Hawkeye from Full Metal Alchemist, Amelia, Rem, and Ram from ReZero, Shaltir and Albedo from Overlord. None of these heroes will be accessible in the game unless a collab happens again. So you can put those out of your mind, guys. I'm sorry. It sucks. It is what it is. But what you all came here for, let's talk about who you do get and who you can get. In my opinion, and some will disagree, I think of all of the units, if you don't have her, you want to pick up Roana. Now, Roana may not look like much on the surface, but whenever anything does an extra attack or counters, she heals your whole team. This is crazy important for labyrinth fights. This is crazy important for a lot of abyss floors. This lets you accomplish a whole lot of PvE sub-events. She's very useful in early arena. This is a unit that on your team will allow you to do a whole bunch of things that you could never do before. I strongly recommend, if you have the means, you pick this unit up. Green Iseria is also a pillar of Epic 7. In fact, I recommend that she is one of the units when you start the game out that you try to get, because she does something no one else can do. Green Iseria can reset the entire cooldown of a unit, and there are some units that have long cooldowns. She is Tamarinne's best friend. She can use her S2 skill on Tamarinne, and Tamarinne is immediately ready to go into idle mode, and that is where you want Tamarinne to be. Iseria also comes with defense breaks on her S1 and her S3. She's a ranger, so she does respectable damage. She's got a full strip and buff block. She is a queen of PvE, and she is a unit you desperately want on your account to tackle some of the more difficult aspects of Epic 7. This one's going to confuse some people, because people are going to say, Aria is really hard to build. Aria is really, really hard to build for this. But Aria is the easiest, most accessible way to get into Wyvern 13. Lowest gear requirement, doesn't require any limited or ML units to use this unit. Very, very clean way with low end gear to start doing a Wyvern 13 one-shot. So I will link that video also in the description if you want to see how to use Aria to do a very clean Wyvern one-shot team with her. She also makes some abyss floors so ridiculously easy that you can actually do them on full auto if you have Aria. Floors where people are DMing me saying, how do I beat it? I'm stuck on this floor. I'm like, pick Aria, press auto. And what's great about her is she is an evergreen unit. Even when you are done with her, you will be able to take her on into Guild Wars, into Arena, into PvP later. I would be remiss if I didn't strongly recommend the Immortal Wukong currently. Now, be aware, Wukong is a pillar of Epic 7 for about 4 more months. You pick this guy up, and even just starting out, I suspect with the rewards and tickets and gear and everything we're getting for this anniversary, I don't even suspect, I know I could take anybody in this game with that gear and Immortal Wukong, and I could get them into Rift to where they are autoing Rift and getting the best, fastest access to the strongest gear in the game overnight. So if you want to farm the most valuable portion of the game for the next roughly 4 months, take maybe a week to get you to the point where you are just cranking this out with just Wukong and nobody else on your team. Not even kidding. So I strongly encourage you to pick up Wukong if you can with one of your selectors. If you are okay with the fact that once 4 months goes by, you're probably going to use him very, very rarely. He'll fall off big time. He'll still have some uses, but not like he used to. Now, Green Bologna, Fire Ravi, and Ice Tenebria. This is my RGB dream team. These are units that let you acquire, or let you get through so much PvE early on. Luluca's kit is stacked, and I'm sure you'll say, but there are better units. There are better units. I used to describe Luluca as the girl that everybody says is hot, but nobody takes to the prom, right? She's the unit that everybody says is useful, but you never see her used on, videos and demonstrations of the best way to do certain things. Except right now for Hall of Trials, but that's kind of niche. Her kit is designed for PvE. The defense breaks, the buffs, her ability to do damage, the fact that she's a mage, she is really, really good for covering abyss floors, for clearing content, and yes, eventually you'll use her less and less. The longer you play, you'll use her less and less, but you're going to find that she solves a lot of problems. When you need a defense breaker, when you need a speed buffer, when you need a defense buffer, she's going to be there on your team taking care of you. So she is a good unit to have for early game. Remember, we're focusing this on people who've been playing in that 0 to 9 month window. Fire Ravi is a self-healing, damage-dealing bruiser machine. She's going to let you clear through a lot of story content, a lot of abyss floors. She is so tough that she can frontline tank almost as good as a knight. She can do a tremendous amount of damage. She's got stuns in her kit. You eventually will put better and better gear on her and take her right down into here where she is one of the better PvP units eventually. So like Aria, she's even more so than Aria. She is an evergreen unit that you will probably have on your account for a long time. Green Bologna saved my Epic 7 existence. I was so hard stuck in this game in early 2019. I couldn't clear abyss floors. I couldn't deal with Labyrinth. I was struggling to do all of the basics in this game, and then I picked up Green Bologna, and suddenly I'm sailing through content that I couldn't scratch before. Her damage based on the target's HP, it's like Daydream Joker baked into her kit, and it stacks with Daydream Joker. So a lot of the early PvE from A13 through Banshee hunts through abyss floors and expeditions, you're going to find lots of uses for Bologna. And yeah, there are times when you're going to not have the burst damage you need to kill, and Bologna fixes that for you. And even to this day, she has very, very solid uses in the Nightmare Labyrinth fights. And lastly, Tenebria. Tenebria is kind of Fire Luluca, right? She is loaded with defense breaks and buffs and does AoE damage, and you rarely see her picked as the best unit for something, but she is very, very usable in so many different places, so many abyss floors, in expeditions. I think Tenebria is a fine unit to have on your team, especially when you're very, very early game. And the last unit I'm going to put in the Pillars of Epic 7 is Destina. Now, a lot of people might question this, because Destina's fallen off quite a bit, right? She's fallen off quite a bit up here. Down here, she is a safety net. She is one of the easiest, most accessible ways to raise your team. She is one of the only units that has strong heals on all 3 of her skills, and her 3rd skill brings your entire team back from the dead. And when you're trying to conquer difficult abyss floors, you're trying to deal with really difficult content, and you're almost finished it, and then, oh, your whole team's dead, but Destina's still alive, you bang her S3, and everybody's back, you get to finish the content. It is so nice to have that safety net going into fights. I can't overemphasize the importance of having a full team raise on this strong of a healer when you're relatively early game. So there you go. That's my top pick. These are the ones that I encourage you that if you do not have these units, these are units that are worth using selectors on. Now let's talk about units that have some in-game uses. I'm going to breeze through these relatively quickly because I don't want this video to be, 5 hours long. We got Baal and Sezan. Baal and Sezan's only use in the game currently is Earth Expedition. He is fantastic. Tenebria works in Earth Expedition as well, but Baal is just slightly better. So if you get this unit, he's really nice to help you do expeditions. That's about his only job. We've got Fire Cecilia. Fire Cecilia used to be up here. She used to be one of the most important knights for PvE in the game. But then the Breiggening occurred, and Breig down here stole damn near all of her jobs, and now about Cecilia's only job left is being the frontline knight in the Earth Expedition. So, much like Baal and Sezan, only usable in Earth Expedition really, and, you know, some Abyss floors. Green Charles, about his only use is as an AoE attack buffer for Banshee. Free Vivian stole his job there for the most part, but he is a great sub DPS there. He's a very high morale unit to take into Labyrinth, and he can be really, really good for some of the Hell raids and earlier Labyrinth raids to clear. But that's about it for good old Charles. He is really good on an A13 team that I have when you get later game, but you're not going to find that you use him much. Once you hit the late to end game, you'll probably find you don't use Charles much at all. Choux. She comes up and down into PvP. Right now, she's out of PvP. About her only use is on Nightmare Raid. She is really, really good at clearing the Executioner Carcanus and Nightmare Raid. And she's a really nice bruiser to take into Guild Wars occasionally. That's pretty much her only use. Fire Ken. Fire Ken is actually really, really good for PvE players. So much so I'm going to move him to the front. What makes Fire Ken good is he has got a guaranteed defense break. He's an HP scaler, so you can build him super, super tanky. It makes him very hard to kill, so he's great in adventures. And when he uses a skill, he does a dual attack with the highest attack unit on your party. Which means when he attacks, your strongest unit also attacks. And that attack is into a guaranteed defense break. That lets you crush through content. As you get towards the late and end game, Fire Ken can give you access to one of the easiest Banshee one-shot teams out there. Fire Haste. I know a lot of you will be like, Fire Haste, doesn't he belong down here? Yeah, if you're late or end game, you don't touch this guy at all. But if you're early game, I don't want you to underestimate the power of a unit who defense breaks, heals the whole team like he's a freaking Soul Weaver, puts a debuff on the enemy that lets your team heal itself, and does terrific damage too. Fire Haste is fantastic for clearing content, for clearing adventure, for clearing abyss floors. He can even be used in Nightmare Raid to kill Vera. I think people really underscore the value of Haste for an early game player. Green Vildred is predominantly a PvP hero, but he is really good in Azimanic 13, the A13 hunts, which is a viable hunt that you want to farm to get the immunity gear and the rage set gear. Fire Lilias is sometimes used down here, predominantly in Guild Wars. She's fallen off a lot in RTA, but this unit is stacked. She dual attacks with her S1. It does pull randomly, but still, she's a dual attack unit. Her S3 cleanses your whole team, and if you build her right, can do insane damage. She's an HP scaler, so you can build her tanky. She's a knight, which means she can wear knight artifacts. Taking her into Abyss will let you solve a lot of floors that you were struggling on because you were getting debuffed, because you didn't have enough damage, because you didn't have enough mitigation. She's a fantastic knight for PvE. She's usable in Nightmare Raid. She is usable as a frontline tank in expeditions, especially if you don't want to have or want to use Cecilia, she can be used in her place. Lilias is a very, very good PvE hero. And then we've got Yufine. Though Yufine is an odd one, right? I'm almost sticking her down here and needs a buff. Building Yufine good enough to kill Wyvern or to kill Banshee is tough. There are other better options typically, but you can use Yufine for a Banshee one-shot team. Her biggest use in the game right now is very, very niche, and that's why she is all the way to the right side of this list. Yufine can be used with her EE in Labyrinth, predominantly the Nixid level Labyrinths, to full auto the entire Labyrinth. And I don't mean until you run out of morale. I mean the entire Labyrinth. You spend about 45 minutes to an hour in the labyrinth with Yufine, and you walk out with 1,000 ancient coins, and you can do this every single day. And now you've got all the mats you need to level up your rings and necks. A link to that Yufine video will be in the description of this video. Do keep in mind, it takes pretty good gear to do the Yufine labyrinth trick, but between that and her usefulness in Banshee, I couldn't not exclude her for some in-game uses, though I'm putting her at the very bottom of the list because of all of these heroes, I think she's the one you should be least interested in spending a selector on, right? Now let's just breeze over PvP units, right? These are the, in my opinion, the strongest, most usable PvP units in the game. And mind you, this is not for the under 9-month people, right? I'm just throwing this out there. These are units that if you get and you're 9 months or younger and you're not a spender, you're not swiping, you're not playing 19 hours a day to try to catch up, you probably don't have the gear to make these units super beneficial to you yet, but you will eventually, and these are the powerhouses. Nahkwol, easily the strongest RGB 5-star in the game right now, bar none. Jenua, easily the strongest RGB damage dealing unit in the game now, bar none. Peira, one of the most powerful openers, and Peira and Ran are both about equal in strength. They trade places on who is more important, and it depends on your playstyle, but Peira is leading the pack a little bit, mostly because she spams buff block, which can shut down Jenua quite nicely. Politis is great. Politis is so good, most people build 2 of her. One to cleave and do damage with, and the other one to keep people from cleaving and doing damage to them. Green Celine is a fantastic damage dealer. And I'll tell you what, there are some very niche PvE uses for her, but she is one of the biggest and best surprises we've gotten out of balance patches in a while. We all knew she was good. We didn't expect her to be this good. Lua is a terror and has only seen a little bit less because of Nahkwol's domination, but Lua is also a fantastic opener and will support your team while shutting down the enemy. Flan is becoming more and more important, especially with the introduction of Frida, for facilitating and initiating both in Guild Wars and in Arena. I'm even seeing her slip into RTA a little bit more often. Elena does have some very niche uses in Labyrinth, right? You can use Elena on your Executioner Carcanis team, but that's a pretty late game build for that Carcanis team. She's much more usable in PvP, Guild Wars, Arena, RTA, where her golden shields that keep you from taking any damage, her ability to cleanse are all powerful. Beehoo, I think, is one of the most underrated heroes in the game. Beehoo is a fantastic opener, spams buff block, does great damage, controls the enemy. Alencia went from this to getting a buff, and now is going to probably be the strongest injury unit in the game. Senya, though she has fallen off in the late game, at the early game, she is still one of the easiest ways to climb in RTA, to defend in Guild Wars. You even see her on some defenses in late game Guild Wars. I think people write off this unit when she is still really, really good. Fumir, though she takes really good gear, is a powerful RTA unit. The Great Mortelix, speaking of underrated, Mortelix is fabulous. HP scaler who's hard to kill, a knight that does damage, tanky knights that do damage. He is Bruiser with a capital B. Do not underestimate the Great Mortelix. Aramentha, everybody used to think this girl was terrible, but now people are starting to build her with speed, and in a control meta, Aramentha is really, really good. Ida, especially with Frida coming in, Ida is seeing a resurgence. Ida is a really, really nice damage dealer for mid to late game, and is even seeing some end game use. Elvira answers problems. Elvira shuts down focus and fighting spirit. She's good in Arena, she's good in Guild Wars. She really has zero use outside of PvP because PvE does not have focus or fighting spirit, and that's her entire gimmick, is shutting that down. Green Pavel is, you could say Green Pavel is really, really good for a Banshee one-shot, and he kind of is, but it takes crackerjack tuning on the gear. He does give you access to the fastest Banshee one-shots, but that's not an easy way to get into Banshee. I think predominantly he is a PvP hero, Guild Wars, some high-end cleave RTA. Even there, you're not going to see him used much, but I can't recommend this guy. I almost feel bad about recommending Yufine, but at least Yufine does have a mid-game level utility, whereas Pavel just lets you do Banshee Hunt a little bit better once you get better gear. Kairon is great, anti-cleave, still a little bit of arena usage. He used to be pretty good for farming, especially for doing Labyrinth because of his very high morale. People love camping with the bad boys, but not enough that he is worth putting in any PvE columns. Zahak is a pure PvP unit. Yulha is darn near sliding down into needs a buff, but she can still be drafted in niche situations where she can save the day. Command Model Lykel is an opener who's just not fast enough to meet with the modern openers, but her kit is debilitating if she gets a turn. Abigail's getting a buff that's going to make her even more useful, but her uses are still principally Guild Wars, Arena, and RTA. I can see you maybe using her to help survive very specific niche content in PvE, but not enough to recommend her for pulling. Elagos, it takes really endgame gear, just hard to use. Violet had his time in the sun, is almost, I can't believe I'm saying this, almost on the door of needing a buff. But he is a really nice counter pick if your enemy is dumb enough to pick all blue. And Teiyu, nobody likes Teiyu. He's a really, really good unit. He is really effective. Just nobody plays him because they hate him. And I get it. I get it. Now let's slide down to the needs a buff category. These are units that you should not pull. These are units that if they land in your lap, don't be upset about it. Just understand that they aren't going to do that much for you right now. Arunca is a PvP unit who is good, but not as good as other options. Krau is a fantastic knight in a world where there are just even more fantastic knights. He was one of the best, most impactful knights for a long period of time, and he didn't get any worse, just other knights got a whole lot better. If you get Krau early on, he is actually going to be quite useful for you, and you might even find some nice uses in PvE with him to support and support your defense, but I think you're going to find a lot of 3-star and 4-star answers will do what he's doing for you, but better. Lilica and Mui are weird ones, right? Lilica and Mui, in their element, are busted good for PvE. This is one of the only non-ranger units that can apply target. She attack buffs, she CR pushes the team, she dual attacks, she does really good damage. Lilica can CR manipulate an enemy all the way to the back of the line. She's a ranger, so she could wear Bloodstone, she could wear Song of Stars. There are some Abyss floors where one or the other of these units solves the problem. There are some things like Advent or once every year special events that come out where these units are fantastic. But once that job is over, once that floor is cleared, once that event is gone, they go back into your storage, not to be touched again until you have a need to call on them. So I can't endorse pulling these units. They really do kind of need a buff to be brought into the mainstream. Right now, their uses are very, very niche. Ervalin, like Yufine, has a pretty good kit for killing Banshee, but that's about it. He really needs a buff to be used anywhere other than killing Banshee, and I think he's only slightly easier to use to kill Banshee. You may as well just use Bologna. Bologna is better at killing Banshee than either of these two ever could dream of being. Fire Charlotte for a brief period of time was busted good because she has the ability to crit with no crit chance. She has the ability to crit things that are wearing anti-crit buffs. So she was great in Talandi, but other units came out or got buffs that let them just do what she did, but better. Now she's really, really good. You can take her into a lot of adventure fights. You can take her into Labyrinth and Hell Raid, but There are just better options, and she really needs a buff to be made more mainstay. I'm sorry, Scully. I can already hear you screaming at me in angry Scottish. I know you love this girl, but she's just hard to use right now. Unless you really, really gear her right and love her, there's just usually better options, better places for that gear. Same story with Ilanov. A very strong knight. You would think she would be right there on tier with Mort, right? She's an HP scaling knight. Her biggest gimmick is injury. She is the first injury unit to come out, and now we've just gotten way more better injury units. Ilanov really needs a touch-up to be brought back into the meta, even with her high damage and her AoE destruction buff. We just need something more for Ilanov than to be an imprint for ML Ilanov, right? Same story with Ludwig. In his day, cleaving with Ludwig was amazing, but now we've got BBK, who's just a better cleaver. We've got ML Ludwig, who's just a better cleaver. We've got Ida, who's just a better cleaver. There's a lot of options to replace Ludwig, and honestly, the gear to make him amazing is probably better suited on other units. Melissa, and I know, I can already see the comments, but hasn't Melissa gotten like 25 buffs already? Yes, but her last buff was actually a nerf, and it completely removed her utility from the game. The best buff they could give Melissa is to completely revert her prior buff so she could be used again. They absolutely killed this girl, which is crazy because she's already dead because she's a vampire. Hopefully, we see Melissa get touched up in a way where she will be usable. Right now, you just can't really use her anywhere unless you force her into a spot where another unit would have been better. Chloe has some very niche uses for Wyvern one-shot, for Banshee one-shot. She's got a unique kit where she can stick Magic Nail, which is a debuff, and it's guaranteed. She doesn't need a soul burn. Only Fire Ken and her have a debuff that can be stuck that doesn't require soul burn, and that opens up some nice niche one-shot comps, but we've just moved on to better teams, and especially with Rift out, you're not going to find a lot of use for Chloe. Early on Wyvern, she's okay, but there are just better options. She really needs a buff to be brought into the mainstay, and I can't endorse her for PvE usage when her use is so niche and so outpaced by other units. I know Sezbomb is strong. I know Lichbits. I know. Stop typing the angry email. This guy can do some amazing stuff if you have the gear and the know-how to make it happen, and you might as well put that gear on a unit that can do the job better. Sez really needs something to be brought back into the limelight. Same with Hua Young. It is terrible that a redhead is this bad for this long. Hua Young broke the game. She was the most unstoppable juggernaut unit in the game. She was so devastating that they threw every single counter unit they could at her, and all she did was kill those counter units. My favorite was Apocalypse Ravi was supposed to be there to kill Hua Young's, and Apocalypse Ravi, they made her so strong she killed every unit in the game except Hua Young, who killed her. So yeah, they eventually had to nerf her. She is one of the first, she is the only 5-star unit that they have straight up nerfed because she was too good since 2019. That's how powerful she was. So they broke her legs, and now she is a shadow of her former self with a tremendous amount of gear. You can force her to be good where other units are simply better. Jenua. So she really needs a little something. Maybe an EE, maybe a slight buff to, you know, kind of repair her enough where she is brought back into the game. Nah, don't want her restored to her prior levels of craziness, but she needs a little something. Kowarik and Kisei. Kowarik and Kisei are the same unit, right? Kowarik and Kisei are the exact same unit, just one is ice and one is fire. I mean, their kits are a little bit different, but their jobs are pretty much the same. To go in and be a secondary bridged-in unit who nukes, debilitates, or eliminates the usefulness of a unit in the fight. They're very, very difficult to use in a modern meta. They're a little too squishy. They die too fast. They need a little bit of help to bring them back. Shirun was really, really good for about 15 minutes, and then other units came out that just surpassed her, Death Dealer Ray, and now she doesn't really have a place in the game anymore. Same with Ice Tywin. For about 5, maybe 6 minutes, he was the talk of the town, and though he can be used, there's just better options in almost every situation. Ray, I used to have up here. Ray, I used to say, hey, this guy can be used in Nightmare Raid. This guy can be used to help facilitate a lot of adventure, a lot of, you know what? A 3-star unit called Bernard came out and does everything Ray does better. So now Rey needs a buff to be better than a 3-star unit that you'll probably pull randomly. Basar, you would think looking at Basar's kit, he would be up here. Or at least up here. The problem with Basar is he's not fast enough. He's an opener who doesn't have opener speeds. If he was faster, he could be usable. Being able to S3 with a soul burn, get a guaranteed strip and a buff block would be amazing, but it's just not enough. Although he has some of the highest attack in the game, his mods are really, really low, so he doesn't do enough damage to warrant his existence. His debuffs are dated, and his speed keeps him from really achieving goals. You will find some niche uses here and there for him, but really, he's pretty close to the bottom of the barrel right now for 5-star units. Right beside Lilibet. Lilibet was our very, very first extinction unit. She is what brought it to the game where you could use... Some people think it was Sez. Sez was around longer than Lilibet, but Specimen Sez got extinction added to his kit at a later date. Lilibet was our first extinction unit. She was brought out to counter Arbiter Vildred, she was the first attempt to counter Arbiter Vildred, who was running over people with his raise skill. And since then, they've never really done much with her. You can try to use her for a Banshee one-shot. It's even harder than using Yufine. And she does pop up with some occasional high damage use into certain water-based special events, but really she is just not a real unit, guys. Kayn was where Wukong was back when last season's Rift was out. And now Kayn is sitting down here needing a buff because he has got no job now that Rift has gone away for him. Now, Earth-based Rift where fire units were used was great, and it will eventually come back again, and when it eventually comes back again, probably in about 8 to 9 months, he might pop back up and be usable again. But for right now, he's down here, and like I said before in the Immortal Wukong, Wukong will probably join him down here somewhere in this tier. Although, unlike Kayn, Wukong does have some uses other than Rift. Kayn really doesn't. We've tried. We've tried putting him into Vera fight. They gave him a buff to try to make him more usable. He is still not usable. In fact, the only unit worse than Kayn, and I can't believe I'm saying this, is this smoking hot redhead Brigitte. Come on, Smilegate. It is unconscionable that we have a redhead that looks this good and whose kit is this bad. You would think that her S3 skill would be really OP, but she is just so hard to sock it in to a modern meta. She really has no use in PvE, and she's very difficult to use in PvP. Hopefully they give this girl a buff and that she'll start to shine. So there's my list, guys. If you have a Selector ticket, start in the top left corner and start moving right, and the first one you don't have, grab it, and just work your way down the list. That's my recommendation. If you want to say, hey, I have Roana and Iseria and Aria, who should I pick? You pick Wukong. You say, oh, my bad, I have Wukong too. Oh, well, then you pick Bologna. Top to bottom, left to right, that's my recommendation. In a vacuum, not knowing your accounts, not knowing your needs. But remember, and this is especially for the new players, unlike most gacha games you've played, Epic 7 is not a unit-based game, right? Units are keys to comps, sure, but in Epic 7, you don't even build units, you build teams. It's a gear-based game. Through gear, you can make almost anything happen, and through gear, you can do this entire game without any 5 stars. There are people who make it their entire job in Epic 7 to do everything with 3 and 4 star units, and you can do that. The 3 and 4 star units are banging amazing in this game, and with the right gear, you can do stuff. Now, certain 5 stars do make things really, really easy and nice, but there is no one unit that is the most important unit in the game. I can sit here and say, Roana, Iseria, and Wukong are the most important units in the game, but you know what? You can't take them into Wyvern. All 3 of them will just die horribly if you do that, and Wyvern is one of the most important aspects of the game to farm. I can say, hey, Aria is one of the most important units for Wyvern, and that's true, but then you want to take Aria into freaking Nightmare Raid or Expeditions, and she will just die. You need the right tool for the job. And this is about filling your toolbox with the right tools so that when PvE tasks come up, you will have the right tool to reach for, be able to gear it, and get the aspect of Epic 7 done. So I hope this is helpful to you. Now, for those of you who came here looking for limited units, what to do with the limited selectors. Maybe you're going to buy that pack that's got the limited RGB selectors in it. Here's my take on limited units, right? Diane and Ocean Breeze Luluca, I am back and forth on who is more important. I can't get past the fact that Diane is an attack buff and a cleanse and anti-crit. She's mitigation. She increases your damage. She heals your team. She is so good in so much early PvE. The only thing that makes Luluca even a contender for this is eventually you'll be able to take her into PvP, right? Eventually. Both of these are tour de force healers. You get anti-crit here, you get defense buff here. You get a little bit stronger healing and attack buff here. You get a unit who's a little bit easier to gear here. Either one of these are great pickups. Seaside Bologna trivializes a lot of Abyss. She's really good in Wyvern, and she's really good in Nightmare Raid. You will find lots of uses for this girl. I think she is as dated and as old of a unit as she is still a very valuable pickup. Even if you don't have Rangar's Drink, I know people say, but how good is she without her artifact? She is fine without her artifact, especially with the buffs we're getting to Yuna's artifact, which you can get for free through her story. Landy. Landy can be used in PvP. Landy can be used in a lot of PvE, especially if you get Bloodstone on this girl. She is your healer. She trivializes a lot of the Abyss. You will find lots of uses for Landy in this game. Cerise is one of the fastest opening rangers who has a strip and a buff block, and you can put Song of Stars, Elysiac Candle. There's lots of ways to artifact this girl up to add utility to your team. She's a little too slow to be a modern opener to take into PvP, but you will find her on expedition teams, and you'll find her in a lot of videos for how to accomplish specific tasks. Cerise is a really nice pickup. Plus, her artifact is one of the more important limited artifacts in the game. Guiding Light. Laia and Lilias are not used much, if at all, in PvE, but they are the two most important limited PvP units in the game. So if you're wanting to break into PvP, you will want these units. Biblis might surprise some people. Biblis is basically Roana, but with a defense break. Now, Roana will heal you every time somebody counters or does an extra attack. Biblis will not only heal you, but she'll splash back, strip the enemy, and put defense breaks on them. It makes her really, really good for a lot of PvE stuff like Nightmare Queen. She's part of my auto team for Nightmare Queen. You'll find her useful on some Abyss floors. Really nice pickup for PvE, and also useful in some RTA situations, especially some Guild Wars situations. Summer Break Charlotte has a AoE attack. She's a knight who can wear mitigation. She does tremendous amount of damage. You'll find her usable in some arena comps, some Abyss floors. A little bit of a dated unit. She's fallen off quite a bit, but she is still quite useful. Luna is fan-freaking-tastic. In fact, I'm going to move her up here a little bit. Luna has a defense break on her S3. If you get the right EE and she kills with that, she immediately gets another attack. If you soul burn her S1, it's giga damage. She is loaded with free stats, which makes her very easy to build. Nice powerhouse unit. The only negative thing we have to say about Luna is all of her attacks are single target, and that makes her difficult to take into modern RTA. She's got very little self-protection, self-healing. You have to rely on artifacts or gears to keep her healthy. So she struggles a little bit, but hey, she is a 2018 unit. She has been out since the beginning for Korea and out since like February 2019 for Global. She is not a new unit, and she has not undergone many buffs, and she is still quite usable in this game. Summertime Iseria has a very unique kit that is still very usable in Guild Wars and occasionally in some RTA. The biggest problem with Summertime Iseria is her kit kind of relies on her artifact, right? I think she is very, very high tier if you've got a max of her artifact. I think she's kind of mid tier if you've got a minimum of her artifact. And I think she is not worth getting if you don't have her artifact at all. I'm serious. If you don't have or plan to use your Selector on her artifact, don't even consider this unit. You need both. You need her and you need her artifact, and you're probably going to spend the next several months sinking your bottles of knowledge into her artifact to make her usable, and you're probably not going to use her nearly as much as you'll use some of these front-loaded units. Lethe is a very, very strong Guild War unit and some arena fights. She is basically Ice Dark Corvus. She's fallen off quite a bit in this Giga tanky meta right now. Very hard to use. She used to be very powerful. Now she's a dull roar. I think she's still worth picking up, especially if you enjoy Guild Wars, but that's about it. Fairy Tale Tenebria is a very nice control unit who, if you can build her fast enough to do things, can really mess your opponent up. If you can build a Fairy Tale Tenebria to a usable point in this game, you're probably not looking at a tier list for advice. Festive Ida, if you can build a Festive Ida strong enough to be usable in this game, you're probably not looking at a tier list. Holiday Yufine is actually quite good for use in Guild Wars and early RTA, but there is a little bit of skill to using this unit. Her ability to cleanse on her S3, her ability to push up, her self-mitigation, her ability to spam burns makes her a great control-ish sub-DPS unit, but not really any PvE usage at all, and her PvP usage is the most niche of niche uses. Blooming Lilica, if you have the gear to make this unit effective in a Blooming Lilica style cleave, then you're not looking at tier lists. And Ahmed, if you have the gear to do Ahmed style cleaving, you're not looking at these kind of tier lists. You've already mastered the game, because these units take top end gear to make them usable at all. And that's why I'm moving them close to the bottom of the list. It's not that they deserve to be at the bottom of the list based on their talents. It's that they deserve to be down here because these are not new player units. These are not, I've been playing for 6 to 9 months units, right? So there you go. From left to right, that's my recommendation for where to use your limited RGB selector for units. So there you go, guys. That's my RGB tier list for September 2024. I will put a link to this image in the description of the video if you want to pull it down. If you think I am wrong on this stuff, and once again, don't at me for Frida being in collab. She's here because you cannot pull her, not because she's a collab unit. She will be locked out from all of the RGB selectors that we're getting from the anniversary event. I hope this helps you guys out. I hope it gives a little bit of clarity. These are just my thoughts. These are my opinions. Once again, I will reiterate, if Brigitte is your waifu, if she is the best looking thing in the game and you have wanted her since you saw her kit, you pick that unit. You pick that unit, you gear her, you find a way to use her, you enjoy looking at her, and you be happy with your decision. Don't let me or any other streamer tell you you're making a mistake picking something you love in a game. But if you're looking for what I think are the most impactful units for clearing content, for handling PvE, top to bottom, left to right. Don't forget to join my Discord. Check out those links in the description for PvE-oriented videos that might help further explain why these units are good and impactful. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and you have a great rest of your week. Happy anniversary, Epic 7.